Over the past 5 months, I have spent 840 hours carving this absolute monster. Helm's Deep, easily the greatest board I've ever built. But Games Workshop asked me to build another location from the two towers. Eventually, I want to build the entire Kingdom of Rohan and the entire map of Middle-earth at Warhammer scale. But our second Rohan build is the almighty palisade fortified city of Edoras. When Games Workshop launched their new edition of Lord of the Rings Warhammer, they sent me an absolute mountain of plastic to bring the city of Edoras to life. And in between building the monster Helm's Deep board, I've made a cracking start. And when this Edoras layout is finished, it's going to be even more impressive than Helm's Deep. So far I've built a huge amount of the upper city, or the royal courts. I even used some of that GW plastic crack to kit bash a destructible gate. I'm hoping by the end of today's video the upper city is fully finished, but our first focus is actually the first section of the lower city. Down here there'll be an entire extra board that is chock-a-block full of GW plastic crack buildings, as well as the entire city encircled in 20 meters of palisade walls. So we've already built a bunch of these lower city buildings, there's a lot more to do, and we've got this gorgeous gate. And this guy is going to be the centerpiece of the lower city and where we're going to start. But before the kit bashing can begin, we need to take stock of our inventory. So this is everything that I've got left. All of the unclipped sprues and then just lots and lots of trimmed up plastic ready to assemble. Just a whole lot more of Edoras. But there is a whole lot more to build. So I'm going to try and recruit a bit of help. And some of these are going over to my mate Adam. So while Adam from 3D Games get cracking on those, let's start working on our own structures. So to work out what structures we're going to make, let's have a good look at this epic location. Our key reference is obviously the films themselves, and in a bunch of the wide shots we can see the inner city that we've got well underway, as well as the lower city, a sprawling hillside densely populated with Rohan structures, all encircled with a palisade ring wall, complete with towers, bastions, and fortified structures. To translate all of that into a massive diorama and keep it playable for wargaming is going to be a tricky task, and there's no better way to wrap my brain around that than a big old mock-up. So first takeaway from this mock-up is we need a hell of a lot more structures. There is no urban density here, and this isn't even the full size of the lower boards. It's gonna go behind me and probably another meter in that direction. We need to start bashing together some plastic. Now I really want to start on the palisades. They'll be a great way to define the bounds of the layout, but the kind of timber walls, they need to undulate up and down the hill slopes, which means the structural kind of landforming needs to be built first. But there is one part of the walls that we can start. All the way along the palisade, there is little forts, towers, and defensive structures built into the walls themselves, which obviously form an important part of the defensive architecture of the ring wall, and critically create a bunch of visual interest dotted around the outer limits of the city. By building a bunch of these in advance, we'll be able to use them to help plan out the wall layout and the landforming further down the track. I already did some experimenting with combining the Rohan house and palisade kits in a previous video, and it worked an absolute treat. So today we're going to lean even harder into this style of combined structures. My idea here is that along these walls we don't just have palisade walls and towers, but also armories, barracks, storage structures built directly into the wall. Our defenders need supplies, weapons, places for the garrison to sleep, and then these structures will also double as wonderful access points for all of our walls and key regions of increased playability that will see a lot of gameplay during our Siege of Edoras games. I ended up deciding that the first house would be a large barracks built right up onto the walls. Now to decide how to integrate this large barracks with the walls itself. We definitely want our palisade gangway to be able to reach the barracks decking for some nice kind of continuous elevated gameplay, but I soon realized that for even more playable area, I should double the width of the main palisade gangway, and then mounted our barracks to the walls and used a short length of palisade to create some wraparound gangway to connect the two sides of the upper deck to the walls. Then I set about planning the upper deck detailing, first experimenting with one of the Rohan watchtower kits. These lovely little kits fit perfectly on any surface that is one wall length wide, so it's going to drop straight onto our upper deck wonderfully. Before fixing on its position, I cut down a palisade wall to take those top spikes off to be our upper deck battlement, and then glued our tower and our newly forged defenses in place. A second platform then joined the top of our tower to the apex of the thatch roof, and once encircled in tower palisade battlements, we have just a glorious amount of playable space up high overlooking the plains of Rohan. This of course needed to be accessible, so in went some ladders. And then a final detail to balance the composition of the structure was a thatch awning on the side of the barracks that faces the inner city. I absolutely love this structure, a big smash and bash of all the kits we have, but my only criticism is that it's very square. There's a lot of right angles, so for structure number 2, I really want to get a little bit more funky with those angles and maybe even mix up my materials. Again, I started by knocking up a basic house structure and then cut down a shortened section of palisade wall, again with a double width walkway for lots of playable space, and then I started experimenting with a bunch of small palisade sections, cutting the walkways on different angles to try and create some unique shaped defenses that break up the right angles of our build so far. To fill in some of the negative space between those walls and the house, I made some walkways from wall pieces and attached them to the side of the house, and then raised the house up on a foam plinth to get that height all sitting nicely, and then added a few more pieces of palisade to our newly formed decking and capped off the gaps in the wall with extra poles and spikes, and then we had a really cool little bastion at the kind of side of the wall as it turns around the house. To fill in some gaps between the palisade and the wraparound deck, I cut down some coffee stirrers and glued those in place, and then textured the foam plinth with a rockwork pattern carved by hand with my pencil, and then textured that all with aluminium foil for a kind of rocky finish, and glued the house down with liquid nails. I then added a few extra details, some ladders and ramps and spare walkway supports beneath the decking to tie it all together, and then for one big final detail to further kind of militarize the domestic house kit, I knocked up a platform from some spare roof gabling and short length walls that I flipped upside down and then capped with a wall platform, and used more palisade spikes to build some fortifications for another little watchtower and elevated firing position on the thatch roof. Also, a big shout out to everyone in my Zorpazorp Discord as well. It was awesome to just like spam you guys with photos and get feedback on how the kit bashing was kind of coming together. We even had a few folks in there kit bashing along with me, making their own Edoras builds. Super cool. If you want to come and hang out in the awesome hobby community on the Discord, the links are down in the description. So these are looking absolutely glorious. Imagine a bunch of these kind of kit bashed fortified structures dotted all along the palisade wall. That's going to be an awesome kind of point of interest for the very exterior of the board. But let's see what Mr. Adam Haig has been up to. That was a little violent. Well, safe to say that Adam has been busy. This is an awesome little structure, and straight away, I'm already getting inspired. And that's the great kind of benefit of folding other crafters into this massive project, is you see ideas from other folks and it makes you think of stuff too. Straight away, I had not even thought to make stairs, like beautiful little log-based stairs by chopping up bits of the palisade. That is going to be super useful when I'm undulating bits of the palisade up and down the hilly slope, which is exactly why Adam's done it here. And also, when we kind of clip off all of the kind of top of the spiky palisades to make these battlements, you end up with heaps of these pieces left over. Now, I've kind of been going, at some point, I've got to find a way to use them. Maybe they're flooring. Adam has, of course, used them as walls underneath more thatched roofing to just get kind of like more generic Rohan houses. An absolute genius idea. So, such a classic Battle for Middle-earth archery range vibe as well. Awesome, awesome piece. Right, one last little fort, and Adam's got me all inspired here to find a way to use all these kind of spare palisade offcuts that have had their spikes removed. And my first thought is some sort of double height palisade tower. I cut down some of those palisade sections and mounted them to the front of an intact wall wall, trimming out the spikes at the center, and then added some cut down full-length palisades straight on top to continue the spiky defenses around the tower, but much higher than the wall below. I then kept the inner side shortened with some more cut down spikes and whacked some palisade gangway to form a platform down on the top. After some acrylic filler to kind of blend all the joins between the various logs and adding in a few extra details, that is working beautifully. So we can see that's absolutely working. A gorgeous ring wall with kind of structures built into the outer palisade. That's going to be fantastic with a lot more buildings and a fully sculpted landform. But I can't really build that landform until Helm's Deep has moved out of the workshop. So we're actually going to move now from the lower city up here to the royal court up above. Now I've done a bunch of work on this, but there's some really special work left to go. We're going to kick it all off with the Golden Hall of Meduseld. Now this inner city region is damn close to finished, but there's some key elements still to be done, and the first, of course, is the Golden Hall of Meduseld. And to get such an epic centerpiece for the board printed, we need the ultimate 3D printer. This is the Bambu Lab P1S, and I've been working with 3D printers since my early engineering days well over a decade ago, and the technology always sort of surprises me when I look at a new machine, but no printer has blown me away like the Bambu Lab P1S. The hardware is just amazing. It's so quirk-free and well-behaved. I have just loved using it. It is lightning fast with a top speed of 500 millimeters per second and really good acceleration, and it's just so reliable. And up here in the AMS, you can load 4 spools of filament, so you can print forever and even do multicolor options. In early January, I already printed out a whole bunch of Helm's Deep, including this monster structure, the Helm's Deep Stable, which I gave a glorious rocky texture using some noise generation, and it printed out absolutely beautifully, as well as some more precise, fine, detailed components like these gates of Helm's Deep. The detail in the prints is just insane. This guy is going to do some serious work for us, although I don't normally print in green. Armed with enough filament to print all of Rohan, I pumped out the Golden Hall of Meduseld, chomping the monster hall into chunks that would fit on the print bed, and the absolutely stunning detail of the sculpts was rendered beautifully in the fine detail print setting. Then I couldn't resist having a play with some of the super cool multicolor capabilities, loading up some very pretty filaments and printing off some goodies for my girls. In Bambu Studio, you can assign what parts of the file you'd like to be what color, and then without me having to do anything, in the middle of the print, the P1S auto reloads the right color filament from the AMS and just keeps on printing. It is literally mind-bending stuff. So here we have Meduseld in a bunch of chunks ready for assembly, and the detail is just stunning. Our first step is cleanup, which is pretty minimal, just removing some light supports that I set up under any overhangs, mostly under various bits of roofing detail like the eaves and those gorgeous horse heads. Then some extreme strength liquid nails for assembly time. First up, our roof, which is printed in a bunch of different pieces, and then I grabbed my modular gaming board for a really flat surface. My poor trestle tables are getting very warped these days, and glued together all of the walls of the main hall. This massive hall is such an iconic silhouette, and the roof line is absolutely epic, with the main kind of primary roof and then that terrace secondary roof sloping over the sides of the walls. You'll notice that I've roughly hollowed the structure as well, so that in the future I can fully interior this beast, but the big job now is our roofing thatch. Back over on the PS1, I smashed out a bunch of thatching plates that I modeled up in Blender in a previous video, and so began the most insane process of this build so far. I had planned to have Meduseld assembled and painted in a single day, and instead this took me almost 4. First, each of these plates of printed thatch needs to be cut perfectly to size to fit the kind of sloping roof line with all the different kind of meeting points and angles of the roofs. I started with the kind of simpler structure, the main roof first, which only has a few tricky sections cutting around where the upper vent juts out of the top and where those lower roofs kind of join into the main structure. But then that big lower sloping roof, well, that's just a lot trickier on both sides, because this is of course where the cut line is for our removable roofing structure. So I needed to make sure that the thatch looked continuous, but would also allow the roof to be detached from the walls. Then I need to make this thatch actually look good and not just a bunch of plates glued together with 2 different blending passes. First, acrylic filler squeezed into into all of the kind of small gaps and then brushed and blended to remove as many joins and seams as possible. Then it is green stuff time. Now this is really the layer that kind of sells the whole roof aesthetic. A bunch of rolled up green stuff blended and then used to kind of smush into all of our massive gaps between thatch layers, and of course the very top of all of our roof lines to blend the two thatch pieces coming together on either side with a nice final layer of thatching running down each ridge. This took an immense amount of time, but I have to say watching these time lapses of green stuffing might be the most satisfying footage that I have shot in ages.
A huge shout out to Ads, my latest Megazorptron, to get a statue on the Patreon on a wall. He has got a mounted Theoden, very suitable for working on Edoras, on a converted Easterling Counterfract horse. A huge shout out to all of my Megazorptrons. Every single one of them gets a statue on the Patreon on a wall. All the super duper Zorptrons get a gorgeous plaque, and all the other Patrons are going on the banners. If you want to get your name up on the honor wall and support all of the madness here at Zorpazorp, it is literally everything to me. The Patreons pay for all of this, so a massive, massive shout out to those absolute legends.
Then once that was all cured, I slapped down some dark grey primer and then hit the structure with a mottled spritz of light grey from above for a bit of a zenithal texture to start building some life into our wood tones. Then it's airbrush time for the wood. I grabbed a bunch of brown inks and a spare piece of palisade and did some tests to sort of try and remember which of the colours I'd used for the rest of the city, and settled on a nice raw umber and slapped a transparent base tone down across every bit of timber on Meduseld, including all of the beams poking out from beneath our thatch layers. Then I mixed up a series of sandy beiges and started with some light bone with a touch of warmth and dry brushed that gently over the entire wooden layer to give our brown that kind of lovely sun-bleached weathered finish that we see on Meduseld. It has been sitting up on the top of Edoras, utterly unprotected from the elements for hundreds of years. Then I grabbed some of the sandy yellows and began to build up our thatch, overbrushing it evenly over the entire roof for some solid coverage, and then once that layer was dry, I mixed in a bit more white and added some sun-bleached highlights sort of sporadically over the entire thatch surface to give it like a really mottled, weathered aesthetic. Then it is gold time, baby, and first up is our good old gold Sharpie for our base tone. If you are picking out gold on terrain with a brush, you are a crazy person. Sharpie for life, people. It is so fast, so much control. It's just such a great weapon holstered in the Zorpazorp tool belt, and there's just so much gold to use it on. All up the pillars, all across the front gable details. There's trim on every wall, details around every doorway. This hall is the king of Rohan's, and he deserves, you know, a nice kind of shiny hall. As I was painting this, I jumped into my library of footage of the location and found some lovely reference of the gold foil being painted onto the actual structure, and realized that my kind of Sharpie tone was a bit too even and it didn't have enough of the zing that it has on the location. So I grabbed some Citadel Liberator gold and applied a kind of overbrushed highlight dappled unevenly across my Sharpie layer. I'm trying to build up this kind of weathered vibe, hinting at what the gold would have looked like when it was first painted on many years ago. Then our final layer is just a massive wash, essentially like a homemade Agrax Earthshade, some black and brown mixed together over the entire structure. This not only accents all of our recessed detail, but also gives the gold and the thatch some kind of much needed toning and just really ties all of the wood tones and the entire piece together beautifully.
Edoras was the second video I ever did on this channel, and to finally have Meduseld finished, I can't really gotta explain how special of a moment this is, but it's looking awesome. And in last month's video, when we finished Helm's Deep, you guys absolutely love that kind of big finished journey, right? Thank you for all the super chats, by the way, as well. That was super meaningful. So instead of jumping down and continuing more lower city stuff, first I want this upper city fully finished. It's time for some landforming and some scenics.
Now, as you guys might remember, this board is in two halves. The front half is basically 100% ready for scenic treatment. It's got a big timber frame underneath which allows the board to slope right down to the edge, and we've already got some glorious cliffs worked all the way around the sides of the board. But the back half is currently balanced precariously on some spare foam, so first we need to secure the foundation of this massive mountain. I ripped the back half out and slapped down some XPS sheeting, marking and cutting it to size, size, and then added another 70mm in height with some cleverly layered foam sheets glued and pinned together with liquid nails, and now we've got our finished core structure. But before we can do the scenic treatment on the whole board, our cliff work around the back of Meduseld needs quite a bit of work. Over the next 4 days, I carved a whole bunch of cliffs encircling the Golden Hall, added a huge amount of gorgeous scenics to finally transport the rolling plains of Rohan to the city of Edoras, and used a bunch of my sprue mountain to add a huge amount of gorgeous final details to the royal court to fully finish the inner city of Edoras. I'll go into detail on all of this in the next Edoras video, but as this one is already 20 minutes long, and we're actually gonna hop to another special project next video, I just wanted to give you guys a nice big taste, a little preview of the finished board to reward you all for showing so much support for this Rohan arc of content. Remember to go and check out Adam's epic video from 3D Games, Wargaming and Terrain, showing how he built his portion of the Edoras Palisade wall. He's also just chucked out his own Helm's Deep board. It truly is Rohan time at the moment. The link to his video is down in the description. And a massive thank you to Bamboo Lab for supporting this project with this gorgeous P1S. I have put so many hours on this printer now, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. If you're new to 3D printing, looking for your first FDM printer, or a veteran who needs another machine to pump out even more plastic, the P1S is the printer for you. Links down in the description. And I am just so thrilled with how much you've all been enjoying Helm's Deep and Edoras, and I cannot wait to bring you even more Middle-earth real soon, right here on Zorpazorp.